Oh, yes. Florida State, Clemson, they have their demands. They want what they want. On today's show, I'm going to explain why the ACC, they don't need to listen to any of this noise anymore.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. I am the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Sports Network. The ACC media rights deal with ESPN is the albatross around the conference's neck. This has been something that we have talked about on this podcast for years now. And with the new deals with the SEC and Big Ten and what they're getting from their respective media partners, it really is putting the conference in a really tough situation. We've heard, numbers up to $30 million behind in the next couple of years for the ACC as they continue to fall behind what could end up being two major super conferences. Now, new ACC commissioner Jim Phillips said when he took over that this was going to be something that he was going to address. This was going to be something that he was going to look into. And according to reports, there was a record distribution to teams this year, to schools this year. They distributed a record $36.1 million, but it expected to fall further behind as much as $30 million per year coming up. So things were going in the right direction. And a lot of that has to do with the ACC network getting into more homes with the Comcast picking them up, things like that. I know that they hired some companies to look into some of that kind of stuff, but we all know what that is. That's all window dressing. That's not getting to the meat of the problem, which is ESPN's deal, which ACC is locked into with a grant of rights until 2036. Not a good place to be in for the conference, because now you have to wait 13 more seasons to figure out what you can do to fix this issue. You can't, we've talked and we'd hoped that there might be some sort of cataclysmic shift, bringing in a Notre Dame, scooping up a couple other teams that would force ESPN to renegotiate. But even now you're hearing more and more reports that even if the ACC brings in more teams, they're going to still be stuck with that same revenue flow. It's not going to change. Again, it would have to be something huge that would change the landscape of college sports, and Notre Dame ain't going there. So where does this leave the options right now? Well, we've started to hear a vocal group of ACC programs start to push for this unequal distribution system. Basically, what these teams want is they want to have the teams that have higher profiles, that have higher marketability, get more money than teams like, I don't know, Boston College, Duke, not even Duke, maybe a little bit for basketball, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Pitt. They want those teams to get less money. And so there's a couple things we're going to talk about on the show, but I want to dive into this first of all. Now, the two schools that are pushing hardest for this are Florida State and Clemson. Clemson totally understand. This is a program that has been trying to battle for national championships under Dabo Swinney for about 15 years now. Florida State had, and I mean, they look like they're heading in the right direction this year. They have had historical success, but haven't seen it lately. But even there, they had someone in their program say that they believe that they should get up to 15% of the ACC's media rights, but right now only receive 7% of it. So they want a whole lot more. So I get it to an extent. I get what these schools are looking at, because you look at the value of Clemson and you compare it to the value of Boston. I'll use Boston College. It's not even close, right? Clemson's media value, their value as a program, completely dwarfs BC. So in that sense, it makes sense that they should demand that. And they have every right to demand that. I'm not arguing that they shouldn't get more money. I mean, Florida State and Clemson do deserve more money. That's not what I'm getting to with this topic here today. I'm looking at it from a conference standpoint. Should the ACC entertain this? Should the ACC look at these arguments and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We get this pool of money. We're going to give us a bigger, more sizable cut to the Seminoles, to the Tigers. And hey, BC, because you guys are a joke or whatever people are thinking, you're going to get a smaller piece of the pie. Georgia Tech, you're going to get a smaller piece of that pie. That's what we're getting at here. We're looking at this topic from a conference standpoint, because it's hard to argue that a school like Clemson doesn't deserve to get more money. They do. They've proven that they do. In our second segment, I'm going to explain why the ACC shouldn't even listen to these guys, because there's a specific thing that I believe is the end game here that really eliminates every argument that's going on in this whole unequal distribution deal. But if you're looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever built. You got to try this. And if you're like me and you want to make healthier snack choices, but you don't want to compromise on taste, I'm telling you, the Built Bars and Built Puffs are healthy and taste amazing. I have one in my bag. I keep one under a box under my desk. They're the perfect thing. They're the perfect meal supplement for me, or meal replacement if I'm having a long day and I just can't get to, making myself something healthy too. The Builts are perfect because they're healthy and they're good and they taste great. They have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. Part I love about that, it keeps me filled. I don't feel hungry an hour later and craving something else. And the best part about Built right now, you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club and get your box of specialty flavors. And then you can go over to built.com, use promo code LOCK15, and get them sent right to your door. So if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, Brownie Batter Puff and Churro Puff, and you can thank me later. Check out Built, folks. This is Locked On BC. I am your host, AJ Black. For all of you, I want to thank each and every one of you who have become an everydayer of Locked On BC. Thank you so much. We're the only daily Boston College podcast out there. There's other podcasts that do it weekly, bi-weekly. I give you the news and notes of everything BC that you need. We give you 5 times a week a podcast. And you everydayers are the lifeblood of this. So thank you all who have done that. Now, I told you in the first segment that Clemson and Florida State, they are making a demand that they're very pushing hard to get unequal distribution of revenue rights as a thing for the ACC, as a way to, get their funds closer to what the Big Ten and ACC, Big Ten and SEC, are getting. And I said, that's fine. They have the right to make that argument. And I think it's a valid argument on their end. However, I think when we're looking at this, the question then remains, will the ACC, like Jim Phillips, will he entertain that? And will the other presidents entertain that? And I'm not arguing whether it's right or wrong, but I will tell you in the end what my thoughts are on this. Jim Phillips probably should entertain it. He should listen, at least give them a chance to talk about it. I mean, it's, as someone who's trying to fix the grant of rights deal, trying to figure out how to get more money flowing into this conference, he owes it to himself to do something about this, right? He got a brand new contract. He's going to be around for a while. So Phillips, I think, should definitely listen to it. Now, here's where I think things should go off the rails. And I believe any sort of grant rights deal or any distribution deal needs to be approved by the presidents. And if I were a president of any of the other schools, minus maybe a few others that are probably on the Florida State Clemson bandwagon, I would tell Florida State and Clemson, no. And here's why. I believe deep in my soul that if Florida State and Clemson could figure out a way to get out of their grant of rights deal, they would be gone in a second. They would leave the moment that they could get out. Okay. So what's the purpose of placating them if their only end goal is to get the hell out of this conference? To get out of Dodge, right? The ACC schools should not be punishing other programs only to feed other programs that have no intention. And again, this is not me knowing anything about where they're going. This is my gut based off of all the comments, because their heads keep talking about it, that I believe that both of these schools, their end game is to get out of the ACC. But why should they get smaller? You're basically completely imploding on yourself to support and fund two programs that don't care, that they want to. They basically have said that they want to leave if they could. Believe me, if the grant of rights had the ability to, like, maybe some lawyer from Tallahassee figures out a way to get out of the grant of rights, you're telling me that Florida State and Clemson would be around 2 weeks later? They'd be in the SEC before Dabo can make a comment about one of his G shucks comments that he loves to make, right? I don't see either of these programs as long-term solutions. So I look at this, right? I thought of when I was thinking about this situation, I go back to I assume many of you have watched Breaking Bad. And I love going on YouTube and watching old clips, the reels of like The Sopranos, The Wire, Breaking Bad, Breaking Saul. Like, I just go back and rewatch those reels, and they just, like, I can suck out like 20 minutes of my life watching these sometimes. But I was going back to the time Hank gets murdered by the Hank, who is Walter White's the protagonist, by the head of the Heisenberg, whatever. They're in the desert. The gang has Hank on the ground. Walter is pleading with the gang to let him go. He's making any sort of, I think he was like trying to promise, like, he'll never talk about it, blah, blah, blah. He'll never do it. He'll never do it. He'll never, just let him go. And the part that strikes me, that reminds me of this situation, is Hank looks up at Walter and says, I think he said, I don't have the words in front of me right now, but like, don't you know they've already made up their decision 10 minutes ago? That's what this Clemson and Florida State situation is. They've made up their decision. Believe me, their decision is already made up. And right now, they're just scrapping for cash. They're not doing anything for the health of the ACC. They're not doing health for any other program but themselves, which they have every right to do that. But the ACC should not capitulate to that. They should not give in to them, because what does that do? You're just hurting all these other programs that are going to be there once those other two schools are gone. So that's my thoughts on that. If you agree with me, disagree with me, hit me up in the comment section. And again, if you're new to this and you're an ACC fan or maybe you're a Clemson and Florida State fan, notice how I did not defend Boston College, because I know the initial reaction to this is going to be, oh, Boston College guys saying this, blah, blah, blah. I am taking this from a general conference perspective. I am not taking this. And I as I said, your schools have every right to ask for this. I'm not saying they don't. So and I'm sure the people who are going to yell at me haven't even listened to the episode, but the articles that I've read also had some other things I do agree with, that schools that get into the college football playoffs deserve a bigger cut of those pies, because right now I believe it all just goes evenly to the conference. I absolutely agree with that. Like, if that's a sticking point to get more money to schools that like Clemson and Florida State that are going to be battling for it, absolutely do that. That's fine. Like, they deserve to get more money for that kind of stuff. I also thought it was absolutely hilarious that Miami is jumping in on this. Yeah, Miami has a bigger brand, but I also, unless you were a fan of the U when Jimmy Johnson was there, Randy Shannon, the early 2000s, Ed Reed, those years, you don't really see the national recognition that you do. I mean, for the last 15 years, you see a lot of this. If you're on YouTube, you see exactly what I mean. A half-empty Hard Rock Stadium. And as much as they want to pout their chests and, give the U sign, the U's not back. The U has no leg to stand on. They're not Florida State. They're not Clemson. So I thought it was hilarious that they're doing this. The other team that I saw was arguing for more money was UNC. I mean, football, they've been fine, but are they a national powerhouse? No. Is every team that has a good couple years going to demand that their brand is that much more superior? I don't know. I don't know why they're on there either. So those were just some other things that came up. Now, they had some other spring meeting things. They're going to be going to talk about tiebreakers for the ACC title. I mean, we'll get more into that later. And that there's some other good things. And if you want to read the whole details, go over to Eagle Insider. Our national guys wrote up some stuff on that. This is just my perspective, right? And I wanted to come out flaming hot on this, and I hope I did. I hope you guys don't hate me for what I said, but that's all good. That's what I'm here for, right? So let me see. Let's see what you guys have to say. Dennis can't bring in more teams unless it was performance-based. Distribution will decrease otherwise. Okay. I don't disagree with Dennis on this one. How about performance-based? Depending on yearly success, payouts like the PGA Tour, you win the league, you get big money. You finish last, you get substantially less. Forces teams to be competitive. Yeah, I mean, I am much more on board with performance-based type stuff, right? Because then you get teams like you had Pitt a couple years ago. They get a good payday. You've got teams, like obviously like Florida State, they get those moments where they're doing it. I think the brand stuff is just silly, right? Football fan says grant of rights deal was his Phillips mistake, right? No, it was the guy before him. It was the ACC commissioner. Why am I blanking on his name? Right before him. So that was a while ago. So it's all about leverage, who has it and who can find leverage. If it can find a way out, it will bring the ESPN to the table with more money. If it's not, ESPN's interest for ACC to implode. Yep. So if you want to see some more of the comments, come on over to YouTube. In our final segment, let's get into baseball. Let's get into women's lacrosse. Both teams had a great weekend, and I'll explain why in just a moment. This is Locked On BC. AJ Black here. And follow me on Twitter at AJ Black 247. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the games that are still going on. Graduation, I think, is coming up for BC in the next week or so, but there's still sports going on. You have baseball, women's lacrosse is in their national tournament. Let's get into what's going on. So baseball had a 2-game series this weekend against a bad Villanova team. I think they have like 10. They're like the inverted BC. They're what you expected from BC last year. Like they had like 10 or 11 wins. They're not good. And that Friday night game, if you had fallen asleep and hadn't been paying attention to all this season, and you looked at the score in like the 4th inning when it was like 9-2 Villanova, you would have been like, typical BC. But if you've been following the team this year, and I even tweeted out, I said, this team's not dead. This game's not over. And that's exactly what happened. They just continued to tear their way back. And Nick Wang, who's on the picture right now on the YouTube channel, had 7 RBIs in this game, including a 3-run home run in the 8th inning to put the team over the edge and take the lead back. This team does not die. This team does not lose easily. Like, anytime they're behind, they're always clawing back. They've got grit. They've got resilience. That's great news for an ACC tournament and NCAA tournament run. Because if you get a team that can figure out ways to manufacture runs, even when your pitching isn't going well, because the pitching was bad, you're going to win games. Now, would you love to have dominant pitching? Sure. But you didn't. That changed on Sunday. Sunday's game, BC just smoked. I think they won, what was it, 11-2? And it was just BC from top to bottom. They dominated in that game. Barry Walsh had a home run. West pitched, I think he had like 9 strikeouts. So he had a much better pitching outing in this game. And BC is now complete. They are clinched into the ACC tournament, which is interesting because we were just bashing on Florida State a moment ago. They're going to miss the ACC tournament for the first time in 41 years. Crazy. So, I think it's 2 teams miss it. So it looks like it's going to be Louisville and Florida State, which is nuts because they're typically like the baseball powerhouses. They just had bad years. So baseball, good weekend. I think they've got a weekend series next weekend against Notre Dame. That'll be big for seeding series, especially because Notre Dame is like right there with them. BC needs to win 2 out of 3, I think, to really solidify themselves for a good tournament ranking for that. Now, women's lacrosse, they played on Sunday afternoon on Mother's Day, and it was a tough game for them. They only scored 9 goals, and they won 9-7 in a very close game against Penn. Jen Majid, I'm trying to get her name right, and I apologize if I get it wrong, had 2 goals, and the defense was incredible from everything I've read. So they get, after this win, they play this week against Notre Dame, and I believe it's a Thursday start. I'm pulling it up right now. They have Thursday, 2:30 p.m. in Newton. They're going to have another game against Notre Dame. So they're trucking along here. Nice win for the women's lacrosse team. So that's going to end our coverage for today's show. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. If there are any mothers out there, I don't know how many mothers I have that listen to this podcast, but happy Mother's Day to all of you that do a lot of hard work that doesn't get appreciated enough. And if you're not a mother, if you're someone who has a wife that with kids, thank them for doing all that hard work too. So this is AJ Black. Follow me on Twitter at AJ Black _BC. I changed it. AJ Black 247. I forgot I lost my blue check mark when Elon went crazy. And so I was like, I'm going to make it nice and professional. So it's AJ Black 247. Eagle Insider. I have a ton of information I've been putting up, including a new basketball offer, BC's official visit list. I have the complete list up. Come on over. Make sure you become part of our army over there on Eagle Insider. We'll be back again tomorrow. Hopefully I'm going to have some big news by the end of this week on a special guest I'm going to have on in a week, but I got to confirm that. So we'll hopefully talk to you about that soon. Take care, everyone.